What if I told you that your daily morning routine could be the very thing that puts you in danger? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Picture this. You wake up early, lace up your running shoes, and head out for what should be a peaceful jog through scenic trails. It's your sanctuary, your moment of peace before the world demands your attention. But what happens when that sanctuary becomes a hunting ground, and you become the prey? This is exactly what happened to Rachel Morrison, a vibrant 31-year-old physical therapist whose life revolved around helping others heal and pushing her own physical limits. Rachel wasn't just any runner. She was the kind of person who treated her morning jogs like a sacred ritual. Rain or shine, you could set your watch by her disciplined routine. Her auburn ponytail became a familiar sight to anyone who frequented the trails of Sonoma Valley, a region that seemed like paradise on earth for outdoor enthusiasts. Has this ever happened to you? You found that perfect running spot, that trail that makes you feel alive and connected to nature? Sonoma Valley was exactly that kind of place, a sprawling network of paths that wound through rolling hills, past world-renowned vineyards, and into oak forests that seemed to whisper ancient secrets. For Rachel, and countless others, these trails represented freedom, solitude, and the pure joy of movement through some of California's most breathtaking landscapes. The local running community considered these paths their sanctuary, a place where the stresses of modern life melted away with each footfall on the dusty ground. From gentle vineyard routes perfect for recovery runs to challenging ridge climbs that tested even the most seasoned athletes, Sonoma Valley offered something for every level of runner. It was the kind of place where you could lose yourself in the rhythm of your breathing and the steady beat of your heart, surrounded by nothing but natural beauty. But stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you about how quickly paradise can transform into something far more sinister. Rachel's story isn't just about a missing person case. It's about how the very places we go to find peace can harbor unimaginable darkness. It's about how someone's daily routine, something as innocent as a morning jog, can become the thread that unravels into one of the most disturbing investigations Sonoma County had ever seen. You see, Rachel Morrison was everything you'd want in a neighbor, a friend, a healthcare provider. Her colleagues at the rehabilitation clinic knew her as someone who never gave up on her patients, who pushed them to achieve recovery goals they thought were impossible. Her friends and family saw a beacon of strength and vitality, someone who found equal joy in the solitude of a long trail run and the company of those she loved. Her boyfriend Marcus often joined her on these adventures, their shared passion for the outdoors forming the foundation of their relationship. On what seemed like an ordinary Monday afternoon in September 2020, Rachel and Marcus completed what would become their final run together. They paused at their favorite trail junction, a weathered wooden sign marking the intersection they'd passed hundreds of times before. Marcus pulled out his phone to capture one of those spontaneous moments that couples treasure. Rachel leaning against the signpost, flushed from their run, water bottle in hand, that genuine smile that lit up every room she entered. What they didn't know was that someone else had been watching, waiting, documenting Rachel's every move with the patience of a predator. What you're about to hear next will change everything you thought you knew about safety, about trust, and about the monsters who walk among us, disguised as ordinary people. The thing about small communities is that everyone knows everyone, and Rachel Morrison had become one of those people whose presence was felt everywhere she went. Her auburn ponytail wasn't just a hairstyle. It had become a symbol of consistency, determination, and hope for anyone who'd ever struggled with their own fitness journey. You'd see her on the trails at dawn, pushing through those early morning miles when most people were still hitting the snooze button, and somehow her dedication became contagious. What struck people most about Rachel wasn't just her physical strength, but the way she carried herself through life. At the rehabilitation clinic where she worked, patients would specifically request her because she had this incredible ability to see potential where others saw limitations. She'd take someone who'd given up on ever walking normally again and somehow transform their entire mindset about what was possible. Her colleagues often said she didn't just heal bodies, she healed spirits, one patient at a time. But here's where the story takes on a different dimension. Because Rachel's impact extended far beyond her professional life. She'd found something rare in today's world, a genuine partnership with Marcus Webb, a 33-year-old data analyst who understood that relationships aren't built on grand gestures, but on showing up consistently for each other. Their evening runs together had evolved into something beautiful and profound, a daily ritual that strengthened not just their cardiovascular systems, but the very foundation of their connection. Marcus wasn't trying to keep up with Rachel's pace. He was choosing to match her rhythm, both literally and metaphorically. They'd developed this unspoken understanding about life, about goals, about the decisions that really matter when you're building something lasting together. Their shared adventures had created a bond that friends and family could see from miles away. It was the kind of partnership that made other couples slightly envious, wondering how two people could be so naturally in sync. The hidden truth about their relationship was that it wasn't perfect, it was real. They'd built their love around mutual support rather than dependency, around shared growth rather than comfortable stagnation. Their journey together had taught them both that the most meaningful transformations happen not in isolation, but when you have someone who believes in your potential, even when you don't believe in it yourself. Behind the scenes of their picture-perfect life, Rachel and Marcus were just two people who'd figured out how to bring out the best in each other. They understood that love isn't just about the big moments. It's about choosing to show up for the small ones, the daily runs, the quiet conversations, the simple decision to keep moving forward together. Sometimes life gives us these perfect moments, these snapshots in time that feel almost too beautiful to be real. Monday, September 14, 2020, was one of those afternoons when everything aligned perfectly. The weather, the mood, the golden light filtering through the oak canopy like nature's own photography studio. Rachel and Marcus were experiencing one of those runs where conversation flowed as easily as their breathing, where the miles seemed to melt away beneath their feet. What's fascinating about this particular afternoon is how ordinary it felt to them in the moment. They weren't thinking about legacy or last moments. They were simply living, planning weekend adventures, discussing the upcoming races Rachel had registered for, sharing those intimate details that couples weave together to create their shared reality. The transformation from everyday routine to something far more significant would only become apparent in hindsight, when every word they exchanged would be replayed in Marcus's mind countless times. The Ridgeline Trail had become their sanctuary, a place where they could disconnect from the digital noise of their professional lives and reconnect with something more fundamental. The rhythm of their footsteps created a natural meditation, a space where important decisions about their future could unfold organically. Behind the scenes of this perfect afternoon was years of shared experiences, thousands of miles logged together, a relationship built on the solid foundation of mutual respect and genuine enjoyment of each other's company. At that familiar trail junction marked by the weathered wooden sign reading RTSH 600, something prompted Marcus to pause. It wasn't planned, wasn't posed, just one of those spontaneous moments when you suddenly see your partner through fresh eyes and want to capture that exact second. The junction itself was a popular landmark where hikers routinely stopped to check their bearings, but for Marcus and Rachel, it had become a personal milestone marker on their regular route. The photo he took reveals everything beautiful about their relationship and nothing about the darkness that was already circling their lives. Rachel's natural pose against the signpost, water bottle in hand, that genuine smile that never needed coaching, it was pure, unfiltered happiness. The hidden truth is that predators often study their victims during these moments of pure joy, cataloging habits, memorizing schedules, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. What Marcus couldn't have known as he clicked that photo was that someone else had been documenting Rachel's movements with far more sinister intentions. The impact of this single image would extend far beyond a sweet memory between lovers. It would become crucial evidence, a timestamp marking the boundary between their old life and the nightmare that was about to unfold. The decisions that shape our lives often feel insignificant in the moment. Marcus's departure for Portland that Tuesday morning was just another routine business obligation, the kind of professional commitment that successful couples learn to navigate without drama. Their goodbye was perfectly ordinary. A sleepy kiss in the dim light of their apartment, casual words about calling later, the comfortable assumption that everything would be exactly the same when he returned. Behind the scenes of this mundane farewell was a relationship so solid that temporary separations felt like minor inconveniences rather than sources of anxiety. Marcus had attended dozens of these technology conferences over the years, and Rachel understood that career growth sometimes required brief sacrifices of togetherness. The transformation from couple to temporary long-distance partners was a well-practiced dance they'd perfected through years of trust and communication. The contrast between Sonoma's natural beauty and Portland's sterile conference environment hit Marcus immediately. Instead of waking up to golden morning light filtering through oak trees, he found himself surrounded by beige walls, fluorescent lighting, and the artificial hum of hotel air conditioning. The corporate world demanded his attention, but his mindset kept drifting back to Rachel's morning routine, wondering which trail she'd chosen, whether she'd seen any wildlife, if she'd remembered to hydrate properly in the warm September weather. What's revealing about Marcus's experience at the conference is how it highlighted the profound impact their outdoor lifestyle had on his sense of well-being. Sitting through keynote speeches and networking sessions, he realized how much his identity had become intertwined with those shared adventures, those morning runs, that connection to something larger than quarterly reports and project deadlines. The journey from city-focused professional to nature-loving partner had been so gradual he hadn't noticed the transformation until he was temporarily separated from it. The hidden truth about long-term relationships is that physical distance often amplifies emotional connection. Marcus found himself appreciating Rachel's presence in his life more acutely, precisely because she wasn't there. Every PowerPoint presentation reminded him of how much more alive he felt on the trails. Every forced conversation with strangers made him grateful for the easy communication he shared with Rachel. Every sterile hotel meal made him long for their simple post-run breakfasts together. But while Marcus was experiencing this heightened appreciation for their life together, something far more sinister was unfolding back in Sonoma. The very routine that brought Rachel so much peace and grounding was about to intersect with a darkness that had been lurking in the shadows, waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity. The psychology of denial is fascinating when you examine it closely. When Marcus dialed Rachel's number at 7 that evening, expecting to hear her familiar voice after a long day of corporate presentations, the immediate voicemail greeting didn't trigger alarm bells. Instead, his mind automatically launched into what psychologists call rational reconstruction, the process where we create logical explanations for unexpected events to maintain our sense of security and normalcy. A dead phone battery seemed perfectly reasonable. Rachel had been working longer hours lately. Maybe she'd forgotten to charge her device overnight. Perhaps she'd gotten caught up with a challenging patient at the clinic, someone who needed extra attention and care. The hidden truth about our minds is that they're remarkably skilled at protecting us from immediate panic by offering these comforting alternative explanations, even when something deeper is signaling danger. But here's where the transformation from calm to concern begins to accelerate. After the third unanswered call, Marcus's rational mind started losing its grip on those comfortable explanations. Rachel's consistency about their evening check-ins wasn't just a habit, it was a cornerstone of their relationship, a reliable touchstone that had never failed them before. The impact of this broken pattern was beginning to register in ways that bypassed logic and went straight to his instincts. The decision to call Emma, Rachel's best friend, represents a crucial mindset shift. Marcus was no longer trying to convince himself everything was normal. He was actively seeking information to either confirm or dispel his growing fears. Behind the scenes of this phone call was the desperate hope that Emma would laugh and explain some perfectly innocent reason for Rachel's silence, maybe a spontaneous girls' night, or a dead phone or a last-minute work emergency. Instead, Emma's immediate confusion matched and amplified Marcus's concern. The revelation that Rachel hadn't returned Emma's afternoon call either was like a domino falling, causing the entire structure of normal explanations to collapse. Emma knew Rachel's patterns as intimately as Marcus did, her meticulous nature about communication, her reliability, her almost compulsive politeness about returning calls and messages. The journey from rational concern to genuine fear happens faster than most people expect. When two people who know someone intimately both confirm the same unusual behavior, it creates a psychological tipping point. Marcus was no longer dealing with a simple communication glitch. He was confronting the possibility that something had fundamentally disrupted Rachel's normal existence. The transformation from worried boyfriend to desperate searcher happened during the longest night of Marcus's life. Pacing his sterile hotel room, calling Rachel's number every 30 minutes, watching the automated voicemail message become a cruel reminder that she was somewhere unreachable. This was the journey no one prepares you for. Behind the scenes of his professional facade, Marcus was experiencing a complete mindset shift, moving from rational, problem-solving into pure survival mode. The decision to check out of his hotel before dawn and drive straight back to Sonoma wasn't logical. It was instinctual. His body had been flooded with stress hormones all night, creating that hypervigilant state where every shadow seems threatening and every minute feels like an hour. The impact of sleepless anxiety had fundamentally altered his perception of reality, making the familiar highway back home feel like a race against time itself. That 911 call required Marcus to verbalize his worst fears, to transform private worry into official emergency. The dispatcher's calm, procedural questions forced him to organize his panic into concrete details. Rachel's running habits, her meticulous schedule, the unprecedented nature of her silence. His voice carried the weight of someone who understood that crossing this threshold meant admitting something terrible had probably happened to the person he loved most. What strikes you about these moments of crisis is how the hidden truth often reveals itself through absence rather than presence. When Marcus arrived at the Ridgeline Trail parking area and saw Rachel's silver Honda sitting exactly where she would have left it, the discovery was both relieving and terrifying. The car represented concrete proof that she'd made it to her destination, but it also confirmed that whatever had happened occurred after she'd started her normal routine. The revelations contained within that untouched vehicle were simultaneously ordinary and haunting. Her sunglasses resting on the passenger seat, the half-empty water bottle in the center console. These everyday objects had suddenly become evidence, clues in a mystery that shouldn't exist. Everything appeared exactly as Rachel would have left it, suggesting she'd begun her Wednesday morning run with no sense of impending danger, following the same ritual that had brought her peace and strength for years. The psychology behind this discovery is profound because it forces you to confront how quickly normalcy can shatter. Rachel had locked her car, grabbed her running gear, and stepped onto those familiar trails with complete confidence in her safety. The journey from routine to tragedy had happened somewhere between the parking lot and the oak-covered hills beyond. The machinery of law enforcement operates with a precision that's both reassuring and sobering to witness. When those first Sonoma County Sheriff's deputies arrived at the trailhead, their transformation of the scene was immediate and methodical. The peaceful sanctuary where Rachel had found so much joy was suddenly bisected by stark yellow tape, its natural serenity replaced by the clinical efficiency of a major investigation. Behind the scenes of this official response was years of training and protocol, designed to preserve evidence and maximize the chances of bringing someone home safely. What's fascinating about this process is how it reveals the hidden truth about missing person cases. Time is both your greatest enemy and your most valuable asset. Every hour that passes reduces the likelihood of a successful recovery, but every piece of evidence properly documented increases the chances of eventual justice. The impact of those first crucial decisions about scene management, witness interviews, and search strategies can determine whether a case gets solved in days or remains cold for decades. The arrival of Officer Patricia Sanchez and her German Shepherd partner Scout represented a shift toward hope and high-tech detection methods. The psychology behind canine search and rescue is remarkable. These dogs don't just smell scents, They read invisible stories written in the air and on the ground. Scout's ability to pick up Rachel's unique scent signature from her car was like accessing a GPS trail that only he could see, a biological technology far more sophisticated than anything humans have developed. Watching Scout work was mesmerizing for everyone involved. His confidence and determination seemed to communicate that Rachel's trail was fresh and trackable, that answers were just ahead on the familiar path she'd walked so many times before. The dog's focus was absolute. His tail held high, his entire body language suggesting they were on the right track. For the first mile, the invisible thread connecting Rachel to her last known location remained strong and clear. The mindset shift that occurs when you're watching a search dog follow a scent trail is profound. You begin to see the landscape differently, understanding that every breeze carries information, every surface holds memories, every step leaves traces that can be read by the right kind of intelligence. The journey Scout was following wasn't just geographical, it was temporal, a pathway back through time to Rachel's final moments of choice and movement. Officer Sanchez felt that familiar surge of cautious optimism that comes with a strong scent trail. Her years of experience had taught her to read Scout's body language like a book, and everything about his behavior suggested they were pursuing solid evidence rather than chasing shadows. The moment when hope transforms into confusion happens faster than you expect. At that crucial trail intersection where the main path continued straight and a smaller track veered toward a shaded creek bed, Scout's confident stride suddenly faltered. His tail dropped, his nose began twitching frantically, and his entire demeanor shifted from purposeful determination to visible agitation. The hidden truth about scent trails is that they tell stories our human senses can't comprehend, and Scout's story had just taken an impossible turn. Officer Sanchez watched her partner circle the junction with growing confusion, his behavior suggesting something that defied logical explanation. Rachel's scent hadn't gradually faded, as you'd expect with time or weather. It had simply vanished, as if she'd been lifted from that exact spot without leaving any trace of direction or destination. The psychological impact of this development rippled through the entire search team because it challenged their fundamental understanding of how people disappear. Behind the scenes of every major investigation, there's a constant tension between following solid evidence and chasing promising leads that might go nowhere. When the elderly Henderson couple approached investigators with their account of seeing a blonde woman arguing with a man near a blue pickup truck, it represented exactly the kind of breakthrough everyone was desperately hoping for. The problem was that their sighting occurred at a different trailhead, several miles away from Rachel's known route, and the timing didn't perfectly align with her established schedule. But here's where the psychology of desperation intersects with investigative decision-making. When you're facing a complete dead end, a scent trail that vanishes into thin air, even imperfect leads begin to look like lifelines. The transformation from methodical evidence gathering to urgent lead chasing can happen within hours when families are depending on you and time is running out. The impact of this decision to pursue the blue pickup truck lead was significant in ways that wouldn't become apparent until much later. Resources that could have been focused on the area where Scout lost the trail were instead diverted to canvassing a completely different location, interviewing witnesses, and searching for a vehicle that might not have had any connection to Rachel's disappearance at all. The mindset shift that occurs when investigators commit to a particular theory is both necessary and dangerous. You need enough conviction to pursue leads aggressively, but you also need enough flexibility to recognize when you're chasing shadows instead of substance. The journey from the promising blue truck sighting to the eventual dead end would consume precious hours and valuable resources. The transformation from ground-level searching to aerial reconnaissance reveals just how vast and unforgiving wilderness terrain can be when you're looking for a single person. From helicopter cockpits high above Sonoma's rolling hills, the search area looked like an endless green carpet punctuated by rocky outcroppings and deep ravines. The pilots and spotters who volunteered their time understood the psychological challenge they faced: scanning thousands of acres of dense forest where a person could be hidden just a few feet off any visible path. The mindset required for aerial searching is unique because you're simultaneously covering enormous territory while knowing that the most important details are probably invisible to you. Through high-powered binoculars and camera equipment, the spotters traced thin ribbons of trail that snaked through the landscape, but the oak canopy formed an almost impenetrable shield over the forest floor. They could see deer, identify rock formations, track the movement of other search teams, but the hidden truth was that Rachel could be lying just yards from a trail and remain completely concealed from above. Behind the scenes of these aerial operations was a constant battle against time and terrain. Drone pilots guided their aircraft through ravines and over ridges with meticulous precision, their high-resolution cameras feeding live streams back to monitors at the command post. The technology was impressive, but it was ultimately limited by the same factor that had frustrated ground searchers: the forest's ability to keep its secrets hidden beneath layers of leaves and branches. The psychological impact of aerial searching on the families waiting for news is profound because it creates this illusion of comprehensive coverage while often yielding frustrating results. Marcus would watch the helicopters and drones from the command post, knowing that dozens of trained professionals were scanning every square foot of terrain, yet somehow Rachel remained invisible to all their sophisticated equipment. Then came the breakthrough that changed everything. Tyler, a college student spending his summer break volunteering with the search effort, was part of a specialized brush-busting team assigned to the most difficult terrain that main search groups couldn't access. His journey that fourth day took him up a steep, treacherous slope choked with thorny manzanita bushes, hundreds of yards from where Scout had lost the scent trail. The moment when Tyler spotted that flash of bright orange against the muted forest colors was electric. A single shoelace, clean and relatively new, snagged tightly on a thorn. It was exactly the kind of evidence that transforms an investigation from hopeless to hopeful in seconds. The impact of this discovery rippled through the entire search operation because it proved Rachel had been in this remote area, far from her normal route. The discovery of that single orange shoelace triggered a transformation in the search operation that was both inspiring and heartbreaking to witness. Within hours, the remote hillside where Tyler had made his find was swarming with dozens of searchers, their movements choreographed with military precision as they established a comprehensive grid pattern. Behind the scenes of this intensive effort was the desperate hope that Rachel's shoelace was just the first breadcrumb in a trail that would lead them to her. The mindset shift among the search teams was palpable. They'd gone from scanning vast areas with little hope to focusing their energy on a specific location with tangible evidence. Metal detectors swept methodically across the terrain, specialized cadaver dogs worked the area with their handlers, and volunteers combed through every square inch of brush and leaf litter. The psychological impact of having a concrete clue drove everyone to push harder, search longer, examine every possible hiding spot with renewed determination. But the forest had other plans. Despite the exhaustive effort, the most sophisticated equipment, and the desperate dedication of dozens of volunteers, the hillside yielded nothing more. No additional pieces of clothing, no signs of struggle, no indication of which direction Rachel might have gone from that spot. The hidden truth was becoming increasingly disturbing. That single shoelace seemed to exist in isolation, a puzzle piece that didn't connect to any larger picture. Meanwhile, the investigation was taking a more uncomfortable turn for Marcus. The journey from grieving boyfriend to potential suspect is a transformation that happens in every missing person case, and understanding this didn't make it any less painful for him to endure. Detectives explained the procedure with professional courtesy, but Marcus could feel the weight of their scrutiny as they requested access to his credit card records, his cell phone data, his hotel, receipts from Portland. The revelations that emerged from this investigation were both vindicating and emotionally exhausting. Security footage from the Portland hotel confirmed his check-in time down to the minute. Credit card transactions placed him at a Starbucks hundreds of miles away during Rachel's disappearance. Cell phone tower data created an irrefutable timeline of his movements throughout the entire period. The evidence was overwhelming and conclusive. Marcus was exactly where he said he was when Rachel vanished. The impact of being cleared as a suspect should have brought relief, but instead it deepened Marcus's despair. If he wasn't responsible, then a complete stranger was, and that possibility felt infinitely more terrifying than any scenario involving someone Rachel knew and trusted. The decision to suspend a large-scale search operation represents one of the most difficult transformations in law enforcement: the shift from active rescue to passive investigation. Search Commander Robert Hayes faced the media with the weight of 2 weeks' worth of exhausted volunteers, depleted resources, and a family's diminishing hope etched into his weathered features. Behind the scenes of his carefully worded announcement was the brutal mathematics of search and rescue. After covering 75 square miles of unforgiving terrain, with no substantial leads, the likelihood of finding Rachel alive had dropped to nearly zero. The psychological impact of this moment extends far beyond the immediate participants. For the volunteers who had dedicated their days to combing through thorny brush and steep ravines, the suspension felt like abandonment, even though they understood the logical necessity. For Marcus and Rachel's family, it represented the transformation from emergency response to long-term uncertainty, a journey from acute crisis to chronic grief that would reshape their lives in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. The mindset required to accept this transition is almost impossible to achieve when someone you love is missing. The hidden truth about search suspensions is that they're not really endings. They're acknowledgments that the case has moved into a different phase, one where breakthroughs come from unexpected sources rather than systematic effort. But for families, this distinction offers little comfort when faced with the sudden silence, where urgent activity once provided at least the illusion of progress. A year later, the bureaucratic transformation of Rachel's case from active investigation to cold case file was both procedural and profound. That thick binder containing topographical maps, witness statements, photographs of the orange shoelace, and Marcus's heartbreaking 911 call joined dozens of others on the shelves of the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office. Each file represented not just an unsolved mystery, but a life interrupted, a family fractured, a community's sense of safety permanently altered. The revelations that emerge from studying cold case statistics are sobering. These files don't represent failures of law enforcement so much as they demonstrate the complex realities of crime in wilderness areas, where evidence can be scattered by weather, consumed by wildlife, or simply hidden beneath layers of natural debris. To the system, Rachel had become a statistic, a puzzle waiting for the missing piece that might never be found. Yet behind the scenes of this official classification, something more important was happening. Rachel's sister Amanda was refusing to let her sibling's story fade into bureaucratic obscurity, channeling her grief into action that would keep the case alive in ways that official investigations couldn't sustain. The transformation from grieving sister to determined advocate happened gradually for Amanda, but the decision to create the Find Rachel Morrison Facebook page represented a crucial mindset shift from passive waiting to active engagement. Behind the scenes of her graphic design work, Amanda channeled her creative skills into something far more personal and urgent than any client project she'd ever undertaken. The page became a digital shrine where Rachel's radiant smile from that final photograph served as a constant reminder that this wasn't just another missing person case. This was her sister, her best friend, her irreplaceable family member. The psychological impact of Amanda's persistent efforts extended far beyond simple remembrance. Each post, each shared memory, each plea for information became an act of rebellion against the cold case designation that had essentially declared Rachel's disappearance unsolvable. The hidden truth about these family-driven campaigns is that they often accomplish what official investigations cannot. They keep cases alive in the public consciousness, creating opportunities for new witnesses to come forward or fresh evidence to surface. The annual memorial runs that Amanda organized became powerful, community events that served multiple purposes simultaneously. They honored Rachel's memory, maintained public awareness of her case, and created a supportive network for other families dealing with similar tragedies. The journey from individual grief to collective action demonstrated how personal loss can transform into social movement when channeled through persistent hope and strategic organization. Meanwhile, in the shadowy corners of the internet, Rachel's story was taking on a completely different life. Online communities of amateur investigators began dissecting every detail of her case with the obsessive dedication that only true crime enthusiasts can muster. Reddit forums and specialized blogs became virtual war rooms where theories multiplied and evolved, each new discussion thread spawning dozens of alternative explanations for what might have happened that September morning. The revelations that emerged from these digital investigations were simultaneously fascinating and frustrating. Some online sleuths proposed tragic accident scenarios. Perhaps Rachel had fallen into an undiscovered ravine, her body hidden by dense vegetation and seasonal debris. Others suggested more sinister possibilities involving predatory behavior, pointing to the remote location and the mysterious vanishing of her scent trail as evidence of foul play. A persistent minority even theorized about voluntary disappearance, arguing that someone as fit and wilderness-savvy as Rachel could have orchestrated her own vanishing. The impact of this online speculation created both helpful pressure and unhelpful noise around the case. While amateur investigators sometimes uncovered overlooked details or connections that professional law enforcement had missed, they also generated countless false leads and conspiracy theories that diverted attention from legitimate avenues of investigation. 18 months after Rachel's disappearance, just when her case had settled into the quiet dormancy of cold file status, something happened that sent ripples of fear through the Sonoma running community and briefly reignited investigative interest in her case. A young woman in her early 20s was jogging on a trail system about 5 miles from where Rachel had vanished when she reported being followed by a man in a nondescript older sedan. The incident escalated when the man parked at a remote turnout, watched her pass, and then exposed himself before speeding away. The transformation of this disturbing encounter into potential breakthrough evidence happened almost immediately. The geographical proximity to Rachel's disappearance site, the targeting of a female jogger, the predatory behavior, all of these elements created a psychological profile that investigators found impossible to ignore. Behind the scenes of the renewed investigation was the desperate hope that this flasher might be the missing piece of Rachel's puzzle, the person who had been lurking in the wilderness hunting vulnerable women. The mindset shift among law enforcement was immediate and intense. Rachel's case was temporarily pulled from the cold files. Detectives began re-examining the possibility of a serial predator operating in Sonoma's trail systems, and patrol units increased their presence in remote parking areas. The impact of this single incident was profound because it suggested that Rachel's disappearance wasn't an isolated tragedy, but part of a larger pattern of predatory behavior. The psychological effect on the community was equally significant. Female runners who had gradually returned to the trails after Rachel's case went cold suddenly found themselves looking over their shoulders again, questioning whether the sanctuary they'd reclaimed was actually safe. The hidden truth about these kinds of incidents is that they reveal how quickly our sense of security can evaporate when we're reminded that predators often operate in the spaces we consider most peaceful. But the journey from promising lead to devastating dead end was swift and thorough. Despite increased patrols, public warnings, and a comprehensive canvass of the area where the incident occurred, the mysterious flasher was never identified. The car description was too vague, the time frame too brief, and the remote location had no surveillance cameras or additional witnesses who could provide more detailed information. The revelations that emerged from this investigation were both disappointing and illuminating. While no concrete connection could be established between the flasher and Rachel's disappearance, the incident demonstrated that predatory behavior was indeed occurring in the same general area where she had vanished. The brief surge of investigative activity yielded no tangible results, and within weeks, Rachel's case returned to its dormant status on the cold case shelves. 2 years had passed since Rachel Morrison vanished from the Sonoma trails, and life had settled into new rhythms for everyone except those who loved her most. It was during this period of resigned quiet that fate decided to intervene in the most unexpected way possible. Thomas Russo, a 68-year-old retired chef, had discovered an entirely new passion that had transformed his golden years from sedentary routine into adventurous exploration. The journey from professional kitchen to foraging in oak forests represented a mindset shift that had reinvigorated his sense of purpose and connection to the natural world. The partnership between Thomas and Luna, his Kuna Kuna pig, had evolved into something remarkable over the months. Behind the scenes of their weekend adventures was a relationship built on mutual respect and complementary skills. Thomas provided the transportation and legal access to private ranch lands, while Luna contributed her extraordinary olfactory abilities to locate the valuable black truffles that grew symbiotically with oak root systems throughout Sonoma County. On that crisp October morning in 2022, Thomas and his wife Carol had driven their old pickup truck deep into a remote stretch of privately owned forest, miles from any marked trail or public access point. The landowner had given Thomas permission to forage, understanding that he respected the terrain and never damaged the delicate ecosystem in his search for culinary treasures. The impact of these expeditions extended beyond simple ingredient gathering. They represented Thomas's transformation from urban professional to rural explorer, a reinvention that had brought unexpected joy to his retirement. The spot where Luna began her frantic digging seemed promising for all the usual reasons. Ancient oak trees created a shaded canopy overhead. The soil was rich and dark with decades of decomposed leaves, and the microclimate suggested the perfect conditions for truffle formation. Thomas initially felt that familiar surge of excitement, anticipating that Luna had detected a particularly large specimen buried in the earth. But something about Luna's behavior was different that morning. Her usual methodical approach had been replaced by an almost feverish intensity, her snorts sharp and insistent in a way that Thomas had never witnessed before. The hidden truth about animals is that they often detect things our human senses completely miss, and Luna's agitation suggested she had encountered something far more significant than even the most valuable truffle. The revelations that were about to emerge from that seemingly innocent patch of forest floor would transform not just Thomas and Carol's quiet morning adventure, but would reignite an investigation that had been dormant for 2 long years. The transformation from anticipation to horror happened in a matter of seconds. Thomas knelt beside Luna, expecting to feel the firm, rounded surface of a prized black truffle beneath his hands. Instead, his shovel struck something soft and unnaturally yielding, something that gave way, with a sickening resistance that immediately told him this wasn't what they'd come to find. The mindset shift from treasure hunter to unwitting crime scene discoverer was instantaneous and devastating. As Thomas carefully cleared away the loose dirt and decomposed leaves, his fingers brushed against a thin, slick surface that was unmistakably plastic. The hidden truth about what lay buried in that shallow grave began to reveal itself as he worked the object free from the earth. It was a translucent grocery-style bag, weathered and dirt-stained, but still intact enough that its contents were horrifyingly visible through the degraded film. Behind the scenes of this discovery was Carol's sharp intake of breath as she realized what her husband was holding. Inside the bag, tangled together in a compressed, soiled mass, were women's athletic clothes, a sports bra with a distinctive pink and white gradient pattern, and a pair of black running shorts. But the clothing wasn't alone. Alongside these items were other, more disturbing objects that immediately suggested violence and violation. A used condom, still in its wrapper, and other intimate items that painted a grotesque picture of what had happened. The psychological impact of this moment was profound for both Thomas and Carol. The peaceful morning spent foraging for gourmet ingredients had suddenly transformed into something that would haunt their memories forever. The air, which moments before had carried the pleasant scent of oak and damp earth, now seemed thick with the weight of a long-held secret finally being exposed to daylight. Carol's response in those crucial seconds demonstrated the kind of quick thinking that can make or break a criminal investigation. Her memory, which had cataloged countless news stories over the years, immediately connected the pink and white sports bra to the missing runner case that had captivated the community 2 years earlier. The revelations flooding through her mind were both devastating and hopeful. Devastating because they confirmed Rachel's fate, but hopeful because they finally provided the evidence that could lead to justice. The decisions Carol made in the next few minutes would prove crucial to the investigation. Instead of allowing shock to overwhelm her judgment, she insisted that Thomas hold the bag steady while she documented everything exactly as they'd found it. Her understanding of evidence preservation, learned from years of watching crime shows and reading true crime stories, guided her actions as she carefully photographed the scene from multiple angles. The drive out to meet law enforcement felt surreal for Thomas and Carol, their minds still processing the magnitude of what Luna had uncovered. They marked the burial site with a bright orange ribbon tied to a nearby oak branch before leaving to contact authorities, understanding instinctively that preserving the exact location was crucial. When they finally met two Sonoma County Sheriff's deputies on a remote dirt road, their story tumbled out in fragmented sentences punctuated by the shock of their discovery. Detective Kevin Torres felt that familiar jolt of recognition as he examined the photographs on Carol's phone. The transformation from routine evidence call to major breakthrough happened in seconds, as his memory connected the pink and white sports bra to the case that had haunted him for 2 years. Behind the scenes of his calm professional demeanor was the electric realization that they'd finally found the break everyone had stopped believing would come. The mindset shift within the sheriff's department was immediate and comprehensive. Rachel's case, which had been gathering dust in the cold files, was suddenly the highest priority investigation in the county. The remote patch of forest where Luna had made her discovery was quickly transformed into a major crime scene, cordoned off with yellow tape and swarming with forensic specialists in white protective suits. The hidden truth about evidence preservation is that time becomes both your greatest enemy and most valuable ally. While 2 years of environmental exposure had degraded much of what the plastic bag contained, the sealed nature of the burial had also protected crucial genetic material from complete destruction. The journey from crime scene to laboratory represented a race against bacterial degradation and molecular breakdown that forensic scientists understand all too well. At the California Department of Justice Crime Lab in Sacramento, the pressure was immense. The impact of this discovery extended far beyond a single case. It represented hope for Rachel's family, vindication for the investigators who had never stopped believing answers existed, and the possibility that a dangerous predator could finally be identified and stopped. The revelations that would emerge from the microscopic analysis of that evidence could transform the entire investigation. The forensic scientists worked with the kind of focused intensity that comes from understanding how much depends on their success. Each step in the DNA extraction process was meticulously documented, every protocol followed with religious precision. The transformation of degraded biological material into a viable genetic profile requires both cutting-edge technology and old-fashioned scientific persistence. When the breakthrough finally came, it was both thrilling and sobering. The lab had successfully extracted a complete male DNA profile from the used condom, creating a genetic fingerprint that could potentially identify Rachel's killer. The decisions made in the next few hours would determine whether this scientific achievement would translate into actual justice. The transformation from anonymous genetic profile to real person with a name and address happens with stunning speed in the digital age. When the DNA profile from Rachel's case was uploaded to the Combined DNA Index system, the massive federal database began its algorithmic search through millions of genetic fingerprints collected from convicted felons, arrestees, and crime scenes across the country. The mindset required to build and maintain these databases represents a fascinating intersection of technology, law enforcement, and social policy that most people never consider. Within hours, the system delivered its verdict. Stephen Phillips, a 47-year-old landscaper living in a modest rental house on the outskirts of Sonoma. The hidden truth about his presence in the database stemmed from a decade-old conviction for indecent exposure, a misdemeanor that had seemed relatively minor at the time, but had required him to submit a DNA sample. Behind the scenes of this seemingly small legal requirement was a system designed to catch exactly this kind of escalating criminal behavior. The revelations that emerged from Phillips's background check painted a disturbing picture of a man who had been hiding in plain sight. His landscaping business provided the perfect cover for his predatory interests, giving him legitimate reasons to drive throughout the county, including near trail systems and popular running spots. The impact of this discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation team as they realized how perfectly positioned Phillips had been to study and stalk potential victims. Detective Torres immediately authorized a covert surveillance operation, understanding that they needed to build a comprehensive case before making any arrests. The journey from DNA match to criminal conviction requires far more than genetic evidence alone. Prosecutors need patterns of behavior, credible timelines, and ironclad proof that connects the suspect to the specific crime. The surveillance team that shadowed Phillips over the following week documented behavior that confirmed their worst suspicions. His daily routine included regular drives past various trailheads and parks throughout Sonoma County, but it was his behavior at these locations that revealed his true nature. He would slow his vehicle to a crawl when female joggers appeared, his attention focused with the intensity of a predator assessing potential prey. The psychological profile that emerged from this surveillance was chilling in its consistency. Phillips wasn't randomly driving through these areas. He was systematically hunting, studying patterns, memorizing schedules, cataloging the routines of athletic women who used these remote locations for exercise. The decisions he made about where to position his vehicle, when to linger, and how long to observe demonstrated a level of premeditation that transformed him from opportunistic criminal to calculating predator. The transformation from surveillance target to arrested suspect happened with the kind of overwhelming precision that SWAT teams execute flawlessly. At dawn on a foggy morning, the quiet neighborhood where Phillips lived was suddenly filled with the controlled chaos of a major law enforcement operation. The decision to use such an impressive show of force wasn't about intimidation. It was about ensuring that Phillips couldn't destroy evidence or attempt to flee before they could secure his property and digital devices. The mindset required to plan these operations involves anticipating every possible scenario. Behind the scenes of the raid was careful coordination between multiple agencies, each team member understanding their specific role in what could be a dangerous arrest. The battering ram that breached Phillips's front door marked the end of his freedom and the beginning of what would become a comprehensive investigation into the full scope of his crimes. Phillips's reaction to the arrest revealed something fascinating about criminal psychology. Instead of the fear or guilt you might expect, his expression showed primarily confusion and bewilderment, as if he genuinely believed that 2 years was long enough for his crimes to be forgotten. The hidden truth about many predators is that they often develop an inflated sense of their own cleverness, assuming that time creates immunity from discovery. While Phillips was being transported to the county jail, forensic analysts began the painstaking process of examining his digital life. The revelations that emerged from his computer were far more disturbing than anyone had anticipated. Hidden behind password protection and buried in obscure folders were hundreds of photographs that revealed the true extent of his predatory behavior. The impact of discovering these images transformed the investigation from a single murder case into something far more complex and sinister. Phillips hadn't been an opportunistic killer who had encountered Rachel by chance. He had been systematically stalking multiple women throughout Sonoma County, documenting their routines with the patience of a professional hunter. The photographs were taken with telephoto lenses from concealed positions, capturing women during their most vulnerable moments of exercise and outdoor activity. Among the digital evidence were dozens of images of Rachel herself, some dating back weeks before her disappearance. The journey from these invasive photographs to her actual murder became clear as investigators studied the chronological progression of Phillips's obsession. He had been learning her schedule, memorizing her preferred routes, planning his attack with methodical precision that spoke to a deeply disturbed and dangerous mindset. The psychological revelations contained within this digital evidence painted a picture of a man who viewed women not as human beings, but as objects to be hunted and collected. The decisions he had made about which women to photograph, when to observe them, and how to catalog his findings demonstrated a level of premeditation that chilled even experienced investigators. The psychology of interrogation reveals fascinating insights about how guilt and denial interact under pressure. In the sterile gray room where Phillips sat across from Detective Torres, the transformation from defiant silence to devastating confession took several hours of patient, methodical questioning. Behind the scenes of this process was years of training in reading body language, understanding criminal psychology, and knowing exactly when to present evidence that would shatter a suspect's carefully constructed denials. Phillips's initial strategy was predictable: complete denial of any knowledge about Rachel, claims that he'd never seen her before, assertions that he had no connection to the trails where she disappeared. But the mindset shift occurred when Torres placed the DNA lab report on the table between them. The irrefutable genetic evidence linking Phillips to Rachel's clothing created a psychological tipping point that even the most practiced liar couldn't navigate around. The confession that eventually spilled out was horrifying, not for its passion, but for its complete lack of emotion. Phillips described stalking Rachel with the detached tone someone might use to discuss the weather. He spoke about memorizing her schedule, waiting in ambush positions, planning his attack with a chilling sense of entitlement that shocked even experienced detectives who thought they'd heard everything. The revelations about his justification were perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the entire confession. Phillips expressed no remorse, no understanding that he had destroyed multiple lives through his actions. Instead, he blamed Rachel for running in provocative athletic clothing, suggesting that her very presence on the trails had somehow invited his attack. The hidden truth about many predators is that they create elaborate mental frameworks to justify their crimes, transforming themselves from aggressors into victims in their own twisted narratives. The impact of this confession extended beyond simply solving Rachel's case. Phillips admitted to killing her when she fought back against his assault, then strategically separating her remains from her clothing to minimize the chances of discovery. His calculated approach to evidence disposal demonstrated a level of criminal sophistication that had nearly succeeded in creating the perfect crime. The journey from confession to recovery required careful negotiation. As part of a plea agreement that removed the death penalty from consideration, Phillips agreed to lead investigators to Rachel's burial site. The location was miles from where Thomas and Luna had found the clothing, in an even more remote section of wilderness that demonstrated Phillips's intimate knowledge of the terrain. The recovery operation brought a mixture of closure and renewed grief to Rachel's family. After 2 years of uncertainty and false hopes, they finally had answers. Terrible answers, but answers nonetheless. The investigation didn't end with Phillips's confession about Rachel's murder. As forensic analysts continued cataloging the hundreds of photographs found on his computer, they began the painstaking process of cross-referencing the images with missing persons cases from neighboring counties. Behind the scenes of this expanded investigation was the horrifying realization that Rachel might not have been Phillips's only victim, but rather the most recent in a series of predatory crimes that had gone undetected for years. The transformation from single murder case to serial predator investigation happened as investigators matched distinctive details from the photographs to unsolved disappearances. A unique keychain visible in one image belonged to a college student who had vanished while hiking in a nearby county 3 years earlier. Another photograph showed a woman wearing distinctive earrings that family members confirmed belonged to a missing jogger from 2 years before Rachel's disappearance. The mindset shift required to process this revelation was staggering for everyone involved. Phillips hadn't been an opportunistic killer who had made one fatal mistake. He had been systematically hunting women throughout Northern California, using his landscaping business as the perfect cover for his predatory activities. The hidden truth about his quiet, unremarkable life was that it had been carefully constructed to hide the monster lurking beneath the surface. The impact of these discoveries transformed Phillips from a local criminal into something far more sinister. The justice system responded accordingly, sentencing him to multiple life terms without the possibility of parole. But for the families of his victims, the legal proceedings represented only partial closure. Nothing could bring back their loved ones or erase the years of uncertainty and pain they had endured. The community's response to Rachel's case demonstrated how tragedy can sometimes catalyze positive change. The revelations about Phillips's crimes prompted a comprehensive overhaul of trail safety protocols throughout Sonoma County. Emergency solar-powered call boxes were installed at major trailheads, ranger patrols were significantly increased, and brush was cleared to improve sightlines along popular routes. Rachel's legacy extends far beyond the circumstances of her death. The changes implemented in her memory have enhanced protection for countless outdoor enthusiasts who continue to find peace and challenge in Sonoma's wilderness areas. The journey from her disappearance to Phillips's capture also demonstrated the crucial importance of never giving up on cold cases, proving that justice can emerge from the most unlikely sources. The story of Rachel Morrison's disappearance and the eventual capture of Stephen Phillips reveals something profound about the intersection of chance, persistence, and justice. From Thomas and Luna's accidental discovery to the DNA breakthrough that finally gave Rachel's family the answers they'd been seeking, this case demonstrates that sometimes the most important revelations come from the most unexpected sources. What strikes me most about Rachel's story isn't just the tragedy of her loss, but the transformation it created in her community. The safety measures implemented in her memory, the increased awareness among trail users, the reminder that evil can hide behind the most ordinary facades. These lessons continue to protect people who share Rachel's love for the outdoors. If you found value in exploring this case together, I'd appreciate you subscribing to the channel. The stories I research and share here go beyond simple true crime. They're examinations of human nature, investigations into how justice works, and explorations of the resilience people show in the face of unimaginable circumstances. Your subscription helps me continue bringing you these deep, thoughtful analyses of cases that reveal important truths about our world. For those of you who stayed with me through this entire journey, leave a comment saying "Justice through persistence." It lets me know you experienced the full story and understood the deeper themes we explored together. If this investigation resonated with you, a like would mean a lot. There's something powerful about connecting over these stories, about understanding together how tragedy can sometimes lead to positive change, and how ordinary people can become heroes in extraordinary circumstances. There's a video right here that complements this topic. Another case where an unexpected discovery changed everything for a family that had almost given up hope. Click and continue with me over there, because some stories are too important to tell just once.